to a KE Report featured webinar with produced in conjunction with Focus Communications. I'm your host, Corey Fleck, also your host over at the KE Report, where we cover a lot of resource exploration focused companies, as well as broad market commentary. In this webinar, we are featuring Kuya Silver, traded on the CSE under the symbol KUYA, also on the OTCQB under the symbol KUYAF, and on the Frankfurt Exchange under the symbol 6MR1. I am joined by the president and CEO of Kuya Silver, David Stein, as well as the exploration director, Dave Lewis. Now, this webinar is very much focused on this Silver Kings project in Ontario. For all of you that have been following this story, there's been some very good exploration results coming out of exploration at Silver Kings. The market has even taken notice of. So David is going to walk us through kind of big picture on this project. Dave will take us through some of the geology, and we are happy to answer any of your questions. So please use that chat function or the Q&A function to ask those questions. I will work most of those in at the tail end of the interview, but if they relate to what either Dave's are talking about, then I'll also mix it in. So David Stein, again, welcome to this webinar. Please kick us off.
Thanks, Corey. My pleasure. Thanks, everyone, for being on with us today. As Corey mentioned, we're going to focus mostly on the Silver Kings project. That's where we've had the recent news, a new discovery that we've made and started reporting some really exciting results on. So look, I think it's a great idea to be able to do a little bit of a deeper dive into what we're doing there. Sort of over and above what might be on our typical corporate presentation or press releases. So I hope we can give you something, that you're not going to get anywhere else on this webinar, and that will be valuable for you. So here are our notices, disclosures. They're no different than for our corporate presentation. So please take a look at those on the website if you want to read it in further detail. So before we start on Silver Kings, let me just talk big picture about Kuya. And I won't go through every bullet point on this slide, but look, I think Kuya is got extraordinary assets, deeply undervalued. And what's really special about this company is that we've got assets that are largely, we've got an asset in Peru that's largely de-risked, ready to go into production, and still has huge growth potential. So it's by no means a mature project at all. It's still very early days in terms of its growth, but we've been very proactive at permitting and doing all those things behind the scenes to basically get it ready for production. So we have a huge advantage there over, I think, our peers. And I mean, at our market cap level, most of our peers are just very, sort of typical run-of-the-mill explorers that, drill and put out reports and do it over and over again. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think Kuya, we give you something different. We are a real silver company. We've got most of our revenue, most of our value of our resources coming from silver. Again, that's something that I think if you actually look at some of our peers, you'll find that it will surprise you how little silver they have, even though they might have silver in their name. So that's one thing. High management ownership, simple story with two 100% owned assets now. And, on the exploration side, we've been able to grow, our footprint with Bethania. Even after we put out our first resource there, we've been able to grow our footprint in terms of the mineralized veins there more than fourfold now. So there's everything's open at depth as well. So there's huge potential there. We're not going to talk too much about Bethania today, but that is a tremendous project. And of course, Silver Kings, we've now got a really exciting high-grade silver project in Canada as well, which gives us, I think, a huge competitive advantage. this is a new slide I'm throwing in, but I really like it. I think, the Lassonde curve is something that gets talked about quite a lot with analysts, with market observers, with investors themselves. And, the main principles here is that, when a new project or a new discovery is, happens in our mining business, there's kind of two big phases where a lot of value is created over a short period of time. One is the discovery itself, as you're sort of drilling it out and getting to what I would say the top of that first peak is probably the first resource estimate typically. And then the second one is when you go into production, because now you've got cash flow, and obviously that has huge implications in terms of value and risk, positive implications for a company. So those are typically the two biggest, the two best times to own a mining stock or junior mining stock is when a discovery is being made and when a mine is being put into production. And we've actually got two projects, and I think they're both in the perfect spot. In the case of Silver Kings on the left, we've got one there where we've just hit really our first hole, made the discovery. So now we get to find out how big it is, and as we do that, more and more value is created. Secondly, with Bethania, we've got a project that is ready to go into production, and again, once that happens, which can happen very, very quickly, within the next 6 to 12 months at the most, we get huge value there as well. So that's why I think we're at the perfect spot in terms of the Lassonde curve for our two projects. And again, that's a unique aspect to Kuya that I don't think you're going to find too many other companies, especially with our market cap size. We've got the two our dual track value creation is something that if you've watched our presentations, you've seen this before. But really, again, to emphasize that we've got two, if not three, different ways for our shareholders to win and to create value as we move these projects forward. We've got the exploration track, which now has two projects, and Bethania, let's not forget, is going to get a lot bigger over the coming years. There's a lot more drilling and resource expansion to do there. We really just scratched the surface with the initial resource there. And then likewise with Silver Kings, we've got something where we're making a new discovery. We're starting to understand the geology there and the implications for doing more, for future discovery or future exploration and doing more drilling there, which is important. We think we've kind of cracked the code there, and so that's something that we can add value by doing more exploration in the coming years. And likewise on the development side, not just building our plant and getting into production in the first place, but keep in mind that very likely we'll be looking at growing that almost as soon as we go into production. We'll be talking about how the next phase of Bethania and the next expansion. So that's something that when you think about how mining stocks are valued and how they're worth, that's really important, because you want to demonstrate growth to the market, keep investors sort of excited and thinking about higher share prices. And again, I think we have that with Bethania. All right, now let's focus in on the Silver Kings project. So, sometimes it seems like this is a bit of an overnight success, but really, it took us 2 full years behind the scenes to put this land package together and, sort of figure out where we wanted to drill. And even then there was a little bit of, Campbell-Crawford probably wasn't our first priority going into this program this year. And now it is, of course, but nevertheless, we have now 18,000 hectares here in the Cobalt camp. The Cobalt is camp is a historical silver mining district in northeastern Ontario, Canada. Most of the production was between early 1900s, 1904, I think, was the first recorded mining, and then going up into the 80s. So produced steadily for about 80 years. The bulk of the production was in the early part of the 20th century. And then it's really been dormant ever since. A few exploration juniors poking around this here and there, but it's been pretty much dormant. So I think we feel like, first of all, that we've got a really attractive land package with lots of areas to work on. We feel now that we've got the projects to actually give a rebirth to this camp, and in the next few years get something into production. We're definitely have been focused more on the northern end. That's where we have the most advanced targets, the most of the historical mining, and most of the information that we have is in the northern block here, which we call the Kerr project. So that's where we're going to talk about mostly today, and that's where the Campbell-Crawford discovery is. Here's what I was talking about in terms of the historical production. Now, this only goes up to 1968, but you can see that after 1904, there was a huge silver rush, really. And if you go back to around 1910, 11, I think 11 was the peak year, where you're producing over 30 million ounces a year from this camp for several years. Probably, I believe it would have been the biggest silver producer, at least for 4 or 5 years in the world. And then, it sort of trailed off, but you would have had literally thousands of prospectors and miners crawling all around the town of Cobalt and the nearby area, looking for these cobalt veins that came right to surface, and then mining them. Narrow vein mining, but extremely rich. Thousands of grams per ton, or even weight % silver was very common back then. And with those kind of grades, you don't have to mine a lot of tonnage to get a lot of ounces of silver, and that's indeed why so much wealth was created in the early 20th century. You can see as well in the red line, cobalt was produced fairly steadily over the history, but keep in mind that in the early part of the 20th century, cobalt really wasn't worth very much. It came to be worth more after World War II for its military uses. Of course, it's much more valuable today because of the electric battery implications.
Hey, David, real quick, who was the last one, a major company or a large company that mined this area?
Agnico Eagle had some production up until the late 80s.
Yeah, Teck had silver fields up to the late 80s as well, so they were involved in the camp as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, and actually Agnico Eagle started their company here. The name Agnico comes from the chemical symbol for Ag, silver, Ni, nickel, and Co, copper. Sorry, cobalt. Cu is copper. Anyway, all right. Now, speaking of Agnico, here's the northern part of the camp. This is where, on this slide, if there was 600 million ounces produced historically in the whole northeastern Ontario, 400 million, or about 2/3 of it, is right here in this slide. The town of Cobalt is of course up here where there's a lot of the dots, and then Kerr Lake is down here. That would have been a secondary production area, but very, very rich. A lot of production from Kerr Lake as well. So the red is our properties, Kuya's properties today, and of course it covers some big historical mines like Kerr Lake and Crown Reserve, and then lots of some smaller ones, and then the bulk of the historical mines are still on Agnico's property today. They do not do any active exploration there. They do reclamation and care and maintenance there, but nevertheless, it primarily the two companies, Kuya and Agnico, that control this northern part of the camp. I think, am I turning it over to Dave on this?
I can take it if you want.
You want to take it, Dave?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So within the Silver Kings project area, we've got a variety of targets, anywhere from conceptual through to advanced stage. And I want to highlight the ones up in the advanced area in particular. So we've got Campbell-Crawford, which has is currently our number one advanced stage target. But we've also got North Drummond, which we've been drilling and working on in a fairly major way here in the last couple of years. It's just at the east end of Kerr Lake. The Beaver Lake Fault is a continuation of the Kerr Lake mine, sort of down in the south end of the property. There was mineralization produced from it, and we're pretty sure there's more there. But the other one we've got in here is historic stockpiles. So we've got a variety of mineralized stockpiles on the property, just muck rock or waste rock from the mines. Looks like there is some silver and cobalt grades in it, and these would be a potential resource that we could exploit. But we've also got a variety of other targets. Some of the intermediate targets, a lot of these were either past producers or other known mineralized area with the potential for expansion. And then a very significant amount of early stage targets and conceptual targets that we want to follow up on here. But I need to back up just a little bit and talk about how we've really refined the exploration model in the camp. It used to be that the model was based largely on dome and basin type geometry and the emplacement of a large igneous body or a large sheet-like sill. We're seeing that the structures in the camp are very important for controlling these targets. And so with that, some of these early stage targets have been reclassified into intermediate and vice versa based on our new modeling. So here's the Kerr project at Silver Kings. A large variety of mines and occurrences. Sorry, I
can help you take that off.
Perfect.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm still there. Hold on.
How do I get rid of that?
There. Let me just move you over here. 1 second. Right there. Clear. There you go.
Perfect. So we've got a fairly large number of mines. There's Silver Fields, which sits here, produced about 20 million ounces of silver, and then 4 major mines right through here. There's Lassonde to the west, Crown Reserve right here, Kerr Lake right here, and Drummond right here. These produced anywhere from 5 to 30 million ounces of silver apiece. But the veins themselves, they're extremely clustered. So you've got a large cluster of veins sort of surrounding the town of Cobalt up through here. And we believe there's a second cluster coming through here with very good potential for more, for additional mineralization. Incidentally, the North Drummond target sits right here. The Campbell-Crawford area is immediately north here. Okay, so the Kerr project at Silver Kings, we did take this over from a previous operator, namely First Cobalt Corp. And with First Cobalt, they did drill a significant number of fairly high-grade silver and cobalt mineralization over reasonable widths. We followed up with Kuya on this hole 93, which intersected 2.2 meters at over 1,000 gram per ton silver equivalent. Okay, but coming back to the camp itself. So in the north here, this northeast map here on the slide, this shows the distribution of some of these mineralized veins within the Cobalt camp. And the section here in the bottom left just shows the position of the major rock units. So in brown on both the map in the top right and the section in the bottom left, it's the Huronian supergroup, which is probably the major host for mineralization. In red here in both the map and the section view is showing where the mineralization generally occurs. But it's the contact between the basal Archean rocks, which are shown here in green, and the Huronian supergroup sedimentary rocks. It's been intruded by this large sheet-like intrusion called the Nipsing diabase sill. And in the top right in the map here, it's shown with sort of an outline about through here with a bit of a window right here. This corresponds with this area from here to about right here on surface with this little window exposed in the center. And I just want to point out very, very clearly that these the veins are spatially associated with the Nipsing diabase sill. And it's so important that really the mines in the Cobalt camp, and this goes back to the history of the camp, the veins are generally within about 75 meters vertically, either above or below the contact of the diabase. So the old timers thought it was the source of mineralization. We're not leaning that way at this point, but we're seeing it as a major control on the distribution of the veins nonetheless, sort of a mechanical control on them.
Dave, is there more cover on the eastern side of this project?
There's more diabase cover. So on this section here, Corey, it would be sort of akin to this area right here where the diabase is sort of covering the ground. And excellent question, because that sort of leads into how we sort of found Campbell-Crawford in the first place. If you've got these Proterozoic sedimentary rocks on surface, the veins quite often outcrop on surface. But if you've just got the diabase sill on surface, the veins may or may not outcrop on surface. And if they do outcrop on surface, the grade of mineralization it just might not be as prolific as within the Huronian supergroup. And on the map here in the top left, areas like this, it's not that they're not prospective. It's just that the diabase sill is the major rock unit that's on surface, and it's less conducive to showing these mineralized veins.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so where we sit at Campbell-Crawford here, it's in the eastern side of our property right here, but we've got two major fault zones, or slip planes. One's right in through here, and this has been known since the early days of the camp. It's called the Cobalt Lake Fault, and on this section here, it would be right in here. And I need to bring people's attention to it, because this zone here produced 326 million ounces silver of the entire 550 some million ounces of silver in the camp. So you've got this huge zonation across these fault zones. Well, it turns out that what we're seeing here in, let me just draw this here, in the southeast is a second fault zone here. Again, it's been known for a long time, but we're seeing it as being a repeat of this Cobalt Lake Fault. So we've got a second one of these fault structures here. And on the southern flank, you've got the Kerr Lake area, which has produced on the order of 62 million ounces of silver, and that would be this area right through here. And then on the northern flank of the fault, between silver fields here down in the south and areas like Colonial and King Edward mines, which are shown here, you've got another 35 million ounces of silver. And sure enough, where our Campbell-Crawford area sits is right here on the flank of this fault zone. The other thing with Campbell-Crawford is that we've got a large system of veins that are coming down in a trend like this. And the only reason they stop here is probably because you're now in the margin of the diabase. So you're probably in this section here within the section. And again, it's not that there's no veins there, it's just that they're below surface and they haven't been uncovered.
So Dave, is that why this wasn't explored before? Because it seems to make perfect sense to just follow it up with all the other mining that's happened.
Yeah, pretty much, Corey. But you got to keep in mind that with the old timers, they were thinking about it in terms of this magmatic domain and some of these long linear lenticular valleys, sort of like this one here. And so they were following these, and they didn't necessarily go underneath the Nipissing diabase sill. So there wasn't a lot of extrapolation. I mean, this is done back in the turn of the century, over 120 years ago. This level of interpretation, it didn't apply. I mean, plate tectonics, which is sort of the driver of what we're looking at here. This came in vogue in the 70s. So it came into vogue probably 60 years after the discovery of the camp. So it's not that they weren't aware of these structures, but they just didn't see the relevance to them particularly.
I think, sorry, if I can interject, the other thing to keep in mind is that, by and large, there were a lot of people looking around here, in the boom days, like thousands of people. And so I think our hypothesis is that if there was a mineralized vein coming to surface, it would have been found already. But Campbell-Crawford is a blind discovery, so it's 200 meters below the surface. There is a little hint. We have like a little peak in the sense that there is a structure at surface that we could follow, but that structure is not economic. It's more just geological. And then when we followed it at depth, lo and behold, it did blow out and become an economic vein. But that's really I think the key to bringing, new eyes on this camp is to, first of all, understand, the geological controls that Dave's talking about, and then, methodically go and drill these areas that can be prospective, but just they were too deep for the old timers to follow from surface back in 120 years ago.
Was there any sort of surface work or survey that you guys did that led you to this area to start drilling here?
Yeah, there is. If you don't mind, I'll talk about that here in just a few minutes,
Oh,
because
sure. No problem.
I've got a 3D model that I'll show with that data, and we can look at our LiDAR survey in the area as well. But short answer to your question, Corey, yes, that there was some surface work, but because it was sort of in the heart of this Nipissing diabase sill, the mineralization wasn't anywhere near as high grade at this particular point. It's right when you get to the contacts that you need to be.
Okay, that's perfect. It ties in with the question that just came in, so
perfect.
It will be
Excellent.
Answered.
Yeah. So as far as it goes, sort of what David was talking about before, or just a second ago, absolutely applies. We knew that there was a vein mineralization on surface. We put our first hole in, hole number 7, trying to intersect this mineralization sort of halfway through between surface and the lower contact of the diabase to get a better handle on how deep this structure was, because it's virtually never been drilled. And our second hole was targeting the intersection of that vein with the lower contact. And lo and behold, this is what we intersected. So, I mean, it was a blind target in the sense that we didn't know whether the vein continued per se, but we did have a target in mind, and this is what we were trying to pierce through. So hole number 8, especially, this is mineralization of the Angus Vein, first reported, I think, in March 15th, then the assays on April 4th. We intersected about 494 ounces silver over 3.34 meters. And for those with the numbers, they've been upgraded just a little bit. The length has been updated just a little bit with our latest press release. Typical high-grade cobalt style silver vein, and by cobalt I mean the town of Cobalt, or the mining town of Cobalt. We intersected up to 7.44% silver over 0.3 meters. Extremely high grade, very visible to the naked eye. But not only was the vein sort of exposed within silver here, but we had silver stringers caught up that were basically perpendicular to the actual vein. And there's some more of them shown a little bit further on down on some of these sketches. Now, those were up to about 1% silver in their own right. So extremely high grade, flatline veins of silver. We followed it up with a few other holes, and hole 13, it turned out with the other holes that we were drilling to the north, it looks like the vein changes orientation as soon as it hits the diabase contact. We turned the drill around for our final hole in the program, which is hole 13, intersected the same vein structure a little bit deeper, and we intersected 77 or almost 78 ounce per ton silver over 2.49 meters. But I want to emphasize with this that we hit high grade core of it, and it was almost 1% silver over 40 centimeters. So here's a little bit of what I was trying to talk about here. So this sketch in the top left, this map here, this shows the position of this Cyril Lake fault, and the section itself is just holes number 7, 8, and 9, or sorry, 7, 8, and 13, which were in line on this plan view here. So we started out with hole 7. This is the first hole. We had work-ins that we knew of right in this area here. We tried to pierce down here, and we intersected a small vein structure here. This is what it looks like here at this level within the diabase. There was a bit of anomalous cobalt and silver within it, but very, very little. But hole 8, when we intersected right at the lower contact right here, this is where we had the big blowout zone, and we were even 10 meters below the contact of the diabase here. Eventually, we pierced it again with hole 13, and that's this one right here. So we intersected that same vein structure right here. It's thinner, but it also had a large sort of brecciated halo where there's some carbonate mineral that it intruded into broken rubbly rock. And I'll show a photo here in a sec, but it's running pretty high-grade silver within that fracture zone as well. And that whole zone was about 2.5 meters across, and it ran 2,400 gram per ton silver. So we were very happy with that. The other thing I want to point out in this section here is this is very well known in the cobalt camp. You've got the diabase contact, which sits right in through here. So I'll put ND for Nipissing diabase. When you get below that contact, you get sort of zones of mineralization where the mineralization starts to pin out and die off. And we're seeing here a silver zone, or AG, right in through here, and that's where we intersected both the high-grade veins, the Angus vein in that zone. But then below that, we get into sort of a cobalt silver zone here, plus or minus nickel. And I mean, with this width here, it's about 70 meters as far as we can tell, and this is absolutely in line with the rest of the cobalt camp here. Speaking of vein zonation, we actually went through and tried to look at this more in detail here last year before we did a drill program. The veins themselves, they're zoned. So you've got maybe a high-grade silver core, and then outwards you get predictable zones. I mean, in this case, we're getting in red here in the bottom right map, silver and bismuth together, and then surrounding that, we've got a nickel cobalt zone, and then a cobalt zone, and then it grades into copper and maybe even just into a barren vein. But these zones are fairly predictable. On this particular map here, we're showing it in some underground workings. Where these veins start to blow out is at vein jogs, vein bends, and vein intersections, which is very important, obviously, for the Angus vein that we've got. And as far as we can tell, our best data suggests that northeast striking veins are by far and away the best. And the reason is because if this is the Nipissing diabase right here, below that, these veins, the plunge of the veins might actually be subhorizontal, which is great because you can just follow the diabase contact. With respect to northwest striking veins, the zonation is more like this, subvertical. But the problem is that as soon as you start getting further away from the diabase contact, you might start, the zones might start drying up regardless. So by far and away, the best scenario, as far as we can tell, is northeast striking veins, and that's what we've got at Campbell-Crawford.
So do you think there's a potential here of there being multiple significant veins, or mostly just one vein with some maybe lower grade veins around?
What we're seeing here so far, Corey, is that we're seeing evidence there's at least one major vein, and that's the Angus vein. It seems to sort of horsetail up as soon as you hit the diabase contact, but we've got pretty good evidence that there's at least a second, and we're now starting a stripping program on surface at Campbell-Crawford, and it's not looking so much for the grade, but it's looking to see, do we have one vein, two vein, three vein, four vein, and what's the continuity of these veins sort of across, along strike. And this would basically help us to see if these are targets at depth. Because with the Angus vein, it seems to be outcropping just on surface at Campbell-Crawford. Certainly we've got evidence that it seems to. We haven't actually proven it yet, but that's what we're looking at starting here on Monday.
Okay.
Actually, Dave, I think if you show the plan map that we have where the drill, with the drill. So yeah, and then I think the other thing worth pointing out here is that, if the vein that we've got on surface is indeed the Angus vein, then that means that it's basically had enough energy when that fracture happened to go through 200 meters of rock, which is a lot. It's a pretty big structure, and could even be deeper than that. All the veins may not necessarily go all the way to surface, but certainly if we find them at surface, it's a pretty good indication that there's a big structure at depth that goes all the way through the diabase and then into the rocks below the diabase, which is where that's our sweet spot.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so moving on, the next thing I want to talk about, we were talking a second ago about some of these silver stringers caught up within the rocks. We've seen this on surface here too. This is me on the edge of an adit, not actually in it. But the main 5-element vein, or the main silver vein, is right here in this pink. But these flat line veins here that you can see sort of in the margin of this open cut, they quite often host very high grade silver. This might actually be where the so-called classic plate silver is in the camp. And we're seeing that in drill holes. We're also seeing that there's potential where some of the old timers might have left some of this silver behind, which is an opportunity for us. But it seems that we're getting the vein itself, and then surrounding that, we've got this zone of flatline fractures here that are silver filled. The beauty with that is that you can pretty significantly increase your mining width with that. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for a second and take a look at the Cobalt cap. Okay, so I assume everyone can see my screen. The town of Cobalt sits.
Not yet. It does not look like it. I will stop the slide presentation. Then
nope, just 1 second.
Okay. Looking good. There we go. Okay. Excellent. Perfect. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Corey. Okay, so where the town of Cobalt is right in this area right here. And Kerr Lake, which is one of our major areas, sits right here. Cyril Lake, which is right on the flanks of Campbell-Crawford, is here, and the main Campbell-Crawford area is up on this hill here. Now, everyone that comes to the town of Cobalt is shocked by how small this area really is. If you drive from this area down this road here to Kerr Lake, it's about a 5-minute drive. If you take this southern road here from the south end of Cobalt into Kerr Lake, it's about a 4-minute drive. So they're very, very close distances. And within the veins themselves, this is the distribution of the veins. Everything in blue is our patents and our leases. Patents are where we own both the surface and the mineral rights. In general terms, this one here is a little bit different, but in green are our mining claims. So this is basically our property. The Campbell-Crawford area sits right in here. Now, with the mined areas, just for a bit of perspective on how tight some of these areas are and why we don't necessarily need a lot of land to produce a huge zone of mineralization. These boxes here show the distribution of some of the mines in the area historically. So for example, Nipissing 404 produced 32.8 million ounces over a very comparable size to what we have at Campbell-Crawford. Deerhorn, which is right across Cross Lake from us, produced 21 million ounces. And again, you can fit that right within our claim block right here. O'Brien and Colonial and King Edward form this nice big trend zone leading right into Campbell-Crawford itself. They produced 1.3 million ounces, 1.2 million ounces, 43.8, and then if you include LaRose, 27.3 million ounces combined. So you're talking on the order of 70 million ounces that were produced just within this area here. Sorry, 80 million ounces produced within this area. And then you've got Kerr Lake and the sort of the greater Kerr Lake area. These areas here alone produced almost 60 million ounces on their own. So you don't need a lot of land here to produce something very significant. And the other thing is this was all produced probably within about 75 meters vertically of that Nipissing diabase. So it's extremely important.
Dave, this is a great, I just want to pause you here because we've gotten a lot of questions and I was going to save it to the end, but people are asking, what is the potential here in terms of overall size of silver ounces that you could have on this project? I know it's so early to give a defined number, but I think this summarizes too just how many ounces you can put into these small spaces. So do you guys want to add more color to what the potential globally at this asset could be?
Look, I mean, I'm as the qualified person on the project, as a professional geoscientist, I can't put numbers in specifically, but I can say we're in a camp that's
there we go.
But I can say that we're in a camp that's produced massive deposits that are extremely profitable over very small surface areas. You just need to be in the right area. So, David, if you want to take
I mean, look, I think obviously the first of all, you want to have a vein cluster. You want to have the really tight density of veins, and obviously the more veins, the better within that space, the better. You can see that the vein density of the Crown Reserve and Kerr Lake area probably even better than most of the mines in Cobalt. You're looking at 50 million ounces there in just two of these historical mine properties. So look, I think at Campbell-Crawford, you definitely can get something that's in the tens of millions of ounces if we have that similar density of mineralization that you see in some of these other properties. And then, that keep in mind, that's only one target. I mean, we think we have something, that's looking quite good at North Drummond. We just haven't been able to drill in the right place there yet. But that's something that we do believe has some really exciting potential. And some of the results have been great from past drilling there as well. So it's not a blind target. We know where to drill. Just it's been technically challenged to drill in the right spot there. So and then there's other parts of the camp. Going back to the exploration triangle model that we showed you earlier, which I think, by the way, had 54 different targets in it. And obviously 3 or 4 are top ones that are the most advanced, but then there's dozens and dozens of targets behind that. So look, I think the potential is sort of that order of magnitude. And the other thing I would mention is, because this is projects in Canada, it doesn't need to be as big in terms of the number of ounces probably to be worth as much as a much bigger project would be in Mexico or Peru or some other country. So let's say, just hypothetically, a 50 million ounce deposit here might be worth as much or more than a 100 million ounce deposit somewhere else. We've got great infrastructure here. We've got a lot of things here that could allow us to fast track production when we're ready. I mean, getting ahead of ourselves a little bit there, but happy to talk about that separately some other time. But this is something that I think once we get ourselves onto a resource, we could have something in production fairly quickly.
Since you brought up production, look, we've had a lot of questions, especially from one individual on here, talking about potential production here. Maybe do you want to reiterate just how early on this discovery is and the steps, the growth that's still potential here?
Sure, yeah, I can take that. Look, as far as it goes in this particular area here, and I'll talk about it in the 3D model here as well. So if I zoom in just on the Campbell-Crawford area, which incidentally is about 700 meters from North Drummond, which is about right in here with this vein cluster here, but it's the orange in particular that I'm talking about. Look, in this area, there's some trenches that are on surface. There's one adit that's about 35 meters down, and it was an exploratory adit. It was not mined at all. They found the vein, they went in on it, and thought that it was sub-economic there. We're 170 meters below that. And as far as drilling goes, there's been one drill hole into this historically. The caller was sort of up in here drilling down in this direction. We've now put a total of 7 drill holes into this area. Our discovery drill hole was the second of the program, and our second confirmation of the vein was the final one of the program. So we are extremely early at this point. We've intersected the vein really only 2 times. On this particular model with the veins projected to surface here, we know that this one's exposed on surface. And we've got potential right through this entire area, not to mention potential for further veins in through here. We also know on the other side of the fault here, which is also our property here, it's called air geode. We've got other veins exposed on surface. Potentially at the lower contact of the diabase, this might become important too, sort of as a twin to this area where you've got veins on the northern or the northwest flank of the fault and the southeast flank of the fault. So it's still extremely early days. We need to do at least one more drill program in the area to start getting a bit of a handle on how big it is, what the vein density is, that type of thing. But theoretically, if that goes well, I mean, look, we could be talking things like decline here in the next year or 2. So I'm going to skip out of this and go to the 3D model. So this is the area here, and I just want to show that this is a 3D model showing the area. In green here is the single drill hole that's gone through this area, and in black is the one adit that we're aware of in this area. That's it. There's no other work in this area whatsoever. The diabase contact is sitting right about here at depth, and so where this particular adit was, it's nowhere near the lower contact, and this is where we're seeing that the veins are starting to blow out. Where this drill hole intersected, it went into the lower contact just a little bit, but it wasn't quite in the right place. And I mean, we've found with our drill program that you need to pinpoint this area very, very specifically. And, they might have hit low-grade cobalt numbers, but they didn't hit any silver and never followed up with it. So our drill program that we did, it's shown here in this teal color instead of in green. So I'm going to take that drill hole off. This is the section that I had put together for the press release here, and maybe I'll shut off the surface elevation model here. And what we're seeing is that the veins, they come down, they're dipping in one direction, and when they approach the diabase contact, they seem to change orientation, and it's where they change orientation, they start branching out and bifurcate or sort of horsetail out and form this much wider zone in through here. And so I'll put on what I've got for a model of the veins themselves. Keep in mind, the orange is the lower diabase contact here. Everything else is veins. I'll even shut that diabase contact off just for a second here. But these all seem to be mineralized veins. Now this is the Angus vein here in pink. When we hit it high up in hole number 7 and through here, this is when it just ran anomalous mineralization, anomalous cobalt, at arsenic. But when we hit it below in the lower contact here with hole number 8, which is this one here, this is where we have that major blowout of the mineralization. Now, as far as it goes, we're pretty confident there's a second vein that comes up through here, in through the Campbell-Crawford adit here. So there's the potential for a repeat of this structure right in here. And now the next thing I want to talk about.
How far is that away, that other vein that you're going to be targeting?
On the order of 15 meters, 20 meters, something like that.
Yeah, it looks right there.
Yeah, if I zoom in here, Corey, from here to here, 42 meters away on the plane of this.
Perfect, thanks.
Yeah, the next thing I want to talk about here is the overall, the plunge of mineralization. The work that we've done here to date suggests that with the plunge of this mineralization, so here's the vein looking at the back of them here. The high-grade silver shoots should follow along the contact between the vein and the diabase contact right in here. And on this vertical section right here, this zone is what we're seeing as far as the high-grade silver content is concerned. And then below that, it seems to grade into a silver plus cobalt, probably plus nickel plus bismuth zone and below. And then it might taper out at depth. That would be sort of the way that these camps go. But as far as the vein goes, I mean, we haven't done any definition drilling sort of along the vein to see what the extent is. This is why I want to do the surface trenching stripping program. But in all likelihood, this is where that plunge of mineralization should follow. Another thing I want to show here is that with our drill program, this is probably how we drilled down the structure. So because that vein bends and changes dip at depth, this is probably, we just probably missed it with some of these drill holes here. We're probably right on the edge of it. And it wasn't until we turned around and drilled this hole 13 right here and pierced the vein again, just to see what was going on. The oriented core measurements that we had match up with this model pretty well. So we've got not only the one major vein, we seem to have a series of veins, and some of these are pretty impressive in their own right. I think one was about 2.5 meters at 218 grams per silver. I mean, that's a good width of mineralization. And it also had cobalt mineralization. I think we had a second one, I think 202 grams per ton silver over 3.5 meters in hole number 8. So some of these smaller little veinlets here, they could have good potential for width and size when you get higher up, but it also bulks up the overall width of the mineralized corridor in here. And when we released hole number 8 here, we had the first intersection around 237 meters within the hole. We also had one at 252 and then one at 272. But that's down the drill hole, and we're going at a fairly steep angle, so they're probably a lot tighter than that drill density would suggest.
What's the drill density that you need to put together some sort of a resource then for this?
I mean, in this here, I mean, we've got a few options. This is pretty tight to drill. We might need to back up and drill a little bit more shallowly just to hit a lot of these at sort of not as high an angle here. If we can establish the plunge of mineralization that it is subhorizontal and lies along the lower contact of the diabase, I think at that point we can start, let's say we set up one pad, say right in here, and let me just put on the bare earth, and then say do 2 drill holes off of it, one at say a minus 68, one at a minus 70, with the idea of hitting that mineralized zone, within sort of a vertical 10 or 20 meter difference that we can start defining. But realistically, with something like this, I think Quentin Henning was talking about this in one of his discussions there a couple of weeks back. He's in favor of putting a decline in and testing it below surface, where we can do horizontal drilling and test this entire zone and hopefully see if there's other mineralization in the area.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have a couple more slides then, Dave? And then I'll get some of these questions to you.
Yeah. Can someone put them back? Put the slide show back.
Yeah, let me try.
I'll whip through them real fast so we can get to the Q&A. That's my favorite part of these presentations, by the way.
There you go. No problem. We have a few questions saved up anyway.
All right. So to summarize, we talked a lot about Campbell-Crawford today, but we do have other targets in the area as well. So this is our land package, and we'll be doing, probably as we go forward, we'll probably be doing most of the work on Campbell-Crawford, because obviously that's where we need to find out how big that's going to be in the short term. But I think we'll be able to allocate a little bit, 10-20% of whatever we do going forward to to building up some of those other targets as well, and finding the next Campbell-Crawford. Okay, just to finish up, this is right out of our corporate slide deck. We've got our share structure here, with the high management ownership, great institutional shareholders as well, management team and advisors. And after we're done with our call, you could maybe jump over to the Crescat call. You might even hear Quentin today. And that's it. So I'll kick it back to Corey. Let's do some questions.
All right, let's do this, guys. A number of people are wondering what the funding's like, especially for continuing exploration, even for another drill program. What can you take us through? What do you think you need to spend here?
Well, look, I think given that we're in Canada, it's really hard not to do flow through. It's a huge advantage, and it's obviously good for the shareholders to be able to raise money at a premium. So I think we'll be looking at something like that at some point in the future. Look, we did our last program all in was about $1 million. We raised in December, flow through. And we still have some of that left, but we'll get through that probably by this end of this month, if not next month. But anyway, my point is that we were able to do a lot with relatively little. So I think if we were able to do 2 to 3 million next time instead of 1, we get more than 2 to 3x in terms of the amount of drilling meterage that we would get, because we also had some other non-drilling related exploration programs that we did in this, geophysics, et cetera, that we did earlier on in the year. So we probably focus more on drilling, and we could get a lot of drilling done for relatively small amount of money. So I think that's an exciting opportunity in terms of doing something with Silver Kings in the second half.
Okay. Now, for follow-up programs, how do you go about balancing out further exploring really around the Angus vein, but then also testing out some of these other potential target areas?
Well, I think that's a sort of a strategic decision that we take corporately. But I mean, my thought right now is we probably put at least 80% of our budget on Angus or on Campbell-Crawford, because it's more than just the Angus vein. For the time being, and but with some drilling budget allocated to test other targets, maybe even more than that, depending on how things go. I think we definitely want to get back and try North Drummond again, and try it, drill it closer to surface. That's one. I mean, we didn't talk much about it today, but in that one, it's more eroded. So our favorable horizon is actually closer to surface there. It's not at surface, but it's closer to surface than at Campbell-Crawford, which is 200 meters deep. And that one, it's been a challenge to drill shallow enough to hit the actual target. So we would go back there and with the next program, and I think we know what we need to do in terms of solving that technical issue. Just we'll have to just wait and do that with the next program.
Yeah, and sort of as a follow-up to that as well, I mean, with Campbell-Crawford, we've got to do a few things. One of them is we've got to test the Angus vein sort of a long strike or a long trend. That's a given. We absolutely have to do that. We need to test the depth extent of it. We've got to test and see whether these sort of vein clusters continue. But the other thing is that on surface, we're seeing several veins. So we'd probably want to do a fence that sort of steps along perpendicular to strike, just to see how many other veins that there are in the system. I mean, our strategy with the first drill program was see there's a vein, test it a little bit further at depth, test it right below the contact, and there's no reason why we can't do that again and see whether or not this is a potentially a significantly larger mineralized area. But that's in specific what I would like to do. Coming back to the whole trench and stripping program, the reason I want to do that is to have starting points so that we've got, sort of, if that's the surface expression, that we can show that we've got vein, with the idea then potentially following up with those at depth.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I can just help target.
It's worth emphasizing that we're hitting a lot of these, kind of narrower vein structures in the diabase where we know it's not going to be economically mineralized, but it tells you that there could be something at depth, right?
Yeah.
And then on occasion we actually hit it below the favorable horizon where we did some deeper drilling, at 270 to 300 meters below surface or drill depth. So there's some where we need to drill shallower to follow up, and some we need to drill deeper. But there's quite a few targets around the Angus Vein there that we, again, just because it was a brand new discovery, we really didn't know what we were getting into there, and until we really started to analyze the data, until really honestly hitting the Angus Vein in the second hole, in hole 13, was really the key, because that gives you the second data point, the second hit on the vein or the vein structure. Yep. And that helps you to figure out the orientation and all those things, whereas a single hit it's very difficult to tell what's going on.
Well, Dave, I guess that really helped to validate your whole theory there. When the vein curved, then it really spread.
Exactly. And to be honest with that, I mean, we didn't know that until we put a few holes in. We had the oriented core that came back. And so, I mean, a lot of these holes that we drilled, I mean, yeah, we put 7 holes in, but a lot of them, when you're drilling straight parallel to the vein without realizing it, that they're not, they don't prove that there's no mineralization there. They just prove that we drilled it in the wrong direction, which is great. That's fine. We've now got that established here. So, we're all set for a follow-up drill program.
Okay. Also, a few questions about the area around the Silver Kings project. Is Agnico currently active around there? And to that point, who else is active in that area, potentially even for teaming up with you guys to explore?
Yeah, so as far as it goes, I mean, Agnico's got sort of the major historical land package. They've got a lot of the land that's sort of locked up in these patents, which don't expire. As far as I'm aware, they're not doing any exploration. They're focused more on their gold projects, sort of in Ontario and Quebec and in other areas, Northwest Territories and Nunavut. So they're not really active whatsoever. We're hoping that there's potential there. A lot of the other players, I mean, Canada Silver Cobalt Works is one. They've got one called the Beaver-Temiskaming mine, which produced about 19 million ounces of silver. I know they're doing a bit of work in the area, but not a huge amount. They don't have that big of a land package in cobalt. They do in Gauganda, which is another silver cobalt camp. Brixton Metals has the Langus mine, and they've got part of the town site, one called the Hudson Bay, a few others. I know they're doing work primarily around Langus. How much work they're doing sort of in the town cobalt, I'm not sure, but there might be potential for a JV or some sort of a deal with them, not sure. There's a few others. RJK Explorations has a big land package, but they're doing diamond exploration, completely separate story from us. We've worked with them in the past. There's definitely potential for collaborative work, but they're in areas where I would say are less prospective. There's a large granitoid body, and they're mostly focused in some of those areas and looking for different targets than us. Who else? Those are sort of the major ones off the top of my head. There's one called Cruise Cobalt.
It's really
there's a lot going on there.
There's a lot going on.
Corey, I would say there isn't a lot going on, honestly.
Okay.
Like compared to other mining camps in Canada, where you'd have, like Red Lake or something, you'd have 10, 20 juniors all with active drilling programs. Here you might have one or two in terms of like actual funded active drill programs. Agnico Eagle is not doing any exploration. This is really for them just a legacy reclamation project. And so, I mean, I think to be fair, we're the leaders in this area at the moment. In the sort of the immediate Cobalt town vicinity. And then there's some interesting projects sort of a little farther flung from where we are, which have similar geology, like Langus and Gauganda, but they're really part of it. They're really not part of the same camp. So so that's, to me, that's my view of what's going on.
Okay.
The
Would you look at building out your land package in this area then? Is there opportunities?
Yeah, look, I mean, we've staked claims. We've acquired some claims as well here and there. We've done a couple of bigger transactions. We've done 3 now to build our land package to what it is today, 18,000 hectares. We're not like super, keen to get more land right now, but we do opportunistically look at it. It almost feels like we have more than we know what to do with right now. And we've got enough, we could explore here for, 10 years plus and still have targets to drill. So there's a lot to do in this area. I think we've got a tremendous land package that is really, really special now, a really commanding land package that we've accumulated over the past 2 years. But there's always opportunities here and there for sure.
Okay. The other thing I'd add to that, if you don't mind, just a quick follow-up to that, is that I would say that our major competitive advantage is our land package, but it's also our exploration model here at this point. I mean, we're seeing areas here that have been developed over the last sort of 5 years as far as exploration development goes from a conceptual standpoint, namely the structural story here, that we're the ones pioneering this story. We're generating targets based on this, and we're now hitting grassroots targets based on this exploration model. So, a lot of the other companies in the area are primarily following up with near mine work-ins. We're, I think, as far as I'm aware, we're the first to intersect significant mineralization since at least the 1980s in a grassroots program.
That's a good point.
Yeah, just a new discovery. Well, I'm going to get you guys out of here soon. Thank you, everybody, for sending in all your questions. We got to as many of them as we can. But we have to talk about Bethania as well, guys. You're not just one asset. And you even mentioned that in your presentation. How are you going to balance out the work? Bethania, you're toll milling. You've mentioned exploration potential there. What happens here? How do you balance this out?
I think it's a good problem to have, two, potentially, huge projects to drill, and both obviously with the silver angle. With Bethania, we've been working sort of behind the scenes on some of the corporate development work, so that we need to do, so that when when we want to pull the trigger and go into production, we can do that. And I think we're getting very close on that. We announced toll milling agreement a few months ago. We and it's not exclusive, so we could potentially do more of those and have different places to send our ore. And then, of course, that's all building up to building our own plant, which is already permitted, and that will be a bigger project that we can tackle. When we have the opportunity in terms of a better market, I would say. We want to limit our financing needs and keep the number of shares outstanding as low as possible. So that's so we're actually very busy behind the scenes on Bethania. And of course, Bethania also has a lot of exploration potential. We have been able to expand the footprint of the vein mineralization that we know, these silver polymetallic veins that basically make up the Bethania mine and the resource estimate that we have right now. They extend off to the west to the Hilltop zone, and then we found them again in 2 other zones that's to the east. We found them in 2 other zones to the west, which is Carmelitas and Carmelitas Norte. We've mapped them, we've sampled them. We know they're mineralized, and now it's just a matter of drilling all those zones. And then on top of that, the main mine area is open at depth, and actually some of the best drill holes we ever had were at depth. So probably the no-brainer thing to do at Bethania is to drill deeper in the mine first, but then the Hilltop zone, Carmelitas Norte, a close second in terms of priority there. So we've got a lot to do there, and we will continue to plug away there. And I think that's one of the going back to the slides that we had at the very beginning. One of the ways that our shareholders can win, 3 different ways: exploring Bethania, exploring Silver Kings, and also getting into production. And I mean, we're really doing all 3 at the same time. I mean, it doesn't always feel like that, but that when you step back, and look at what we're able to do over the past year or two, that is indeed what we've been able to accomplish.
So news flow wise, then let's say we're almost halfway through this year. So for the rest of this year, it's still going to be mostly Silver Kings, though, or should we be expecting?
Not necessarily. No, I think stay tuned, and we've got we're working on stuff that we could announce at Bethania as well, and I would say expect to hear from us on both projects.
Okay, we'll leave it at that then, guys. David, thank you very much for your time, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Please keep sending in your questions. You can even email me directly, fleck@kereport.com. I will be having the company on my show for general updates as more news comes out. So everybody, again, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back with another webinar soon.
Thanks very much. And thanks, Corey.